You didn't mean to chase a delusion, it just sort of happened. One moment you're staring at dry, overworked farmland and a future that smells like horse sweat and generational disappointment. The next you're holding a cheap pamphlet that swears California is Eden with real estate, rich soil, endless sun, rivers full of gold and trout the size of toddlers. You can't read half the words, but the pictures look promising. Rolling hills, orchards, smiling settlers dressed entirely too clean for people who live outdoors. And someone says, the government will give you land just for showing up. You don't question how that works or who it belonged to before. That's not your department. You hear the words, manifest destiny, and they sound official, like something printed on money or taught by someone wearing a hat with authority. The idea is simple. God wants you to go west. He also apparently wants you to survive typhoid, axle breaks, snow drifts, and starvation. But that part isn't mentioned just yet. Right now, all you can see is the promise. 2,000 years of possibility, a new life, a better one with orchards, allegedly. So, you pack. And by pack, you mean you throw every sentimental, impractical, or mildly useful object you own into a wagon you've never actually driven before. Your cousins said oxen were better than mules, so you get oxen. They're huge and smell like sour mud, but they eat grass and move slowly in a straight line, which frankly makes them the most dependable part of this entire operation. You're advised to travel light. You do not. No one does. Instead, your wagon groans under the weight of a small forge, an heirloom arm wire, 400 pounds of flour, a ceramic punch bowl, and enough salted pork to kill a small nation via sodium. You tell yourself you'll need it all. You will not. Your family joins a wagon train departing from Independence, Missouri, a misnamed town. Considering how dependent everyone is on one another to survive, you meet your fellow travelers. There's a mix of farmers, traders, preachers, children, widows, and one guy named Lemuel who insists he's a doctor, but also thinks bathing causes weakness. Spirits are high, hope is higher, and competence is suspiciously low. None of you have done this before. The trail begins easy. Flat land, warm days, the steady plot of hooves and wheels over soft earth. There are songs, laughter, the illusion of progress. You're making 10, maybe 15 miles a day. You feel accomplished. You pass other wagons, exchange stories. Wave like this is all a very slow parade. The trail is crowded this year, hundreds of people heading west, chasing the same promise, with the same poorly packed wagons and sunburned optimism. You quickly learn that the land doesn't care about your dreams or your maps. Speaking of which, yours is terrible. The paper is already fraying at the edges, and half the landmarks are drawn like a child's crayon project. Rivers appear where there aren't any. Mountains are labelled hills. Whole valleys are left off entirely, as if the cartographer simply gave up midway through and assumed you'd figure it out. You follow it anyway. You don't have another choice. Along the way, people get sick. The trail has its own illnesses: cholera, dysentery, scurvy, and the ever-popular general malaise. They're not exotic, just persistent. You lose a few fellow travelers early. No one talks about it much. There's no time to mourn when the wagons need moving, and you're still 1,000 miles from anything that resembles a town. The food situation begins to change. You start rationing sooner than expected. Turns out hauling 1,500 lad of flour doesn't help much when the axle breaks or the barrels get wet. Some folks drop supplies by the roadside to lighten their load. You do the same. Goodbye armoire, goodbye ceramic punch bowl. You regret none of it except maybe the punch bowl. That was your grandmother's. Water becomes a problem next. You cross dry stretches that leave your mouth feeling like an old broom. The oxen begin to stumble. Your boots rub your skin raw. Blisters become open wounds. The smell of unwashed people and sun-baked meat creates a constant cloud of discomfort. Your wagon train loses its cheer. The laughter fades. No one sings anymore. You press on. You don't really know how to stop. The trail is not what you expected. You imagined the occasional hardship. Sure, a thunderstorm here, a broken wheel there, maybe a dramatic river crossing where someone yells, "Yeah!" and a wagon tips dangerously but rights itself just in time. That's not what you get. What you get is a schedule built by sadists. You wake up before dawn every day. Around 4:00 in the morning, someone rings a bell or shouts or simply coughs loud enough to remind everyone that sleep is a privilege the prairie does not afford. The ground is cold and damp. The canvas cover of your wagon leaks, and everything you own smells like a damp root cellar. You crawl out of your bedding stiff, itchy, and deeply aware that you haven't had a real bath since Missouri. Breakfast is basic. Dry bread, maybe beans if there's time, bacon if it hasn't gone rancid. You chew slowly, more out of resignation than appetite. And then you pack the wagon, yoke the oxen, and begin walking, always walking. Most of the day is spent on foot. Only the very old, the very young, or the very rich ride. Everyone else trudges alongside creaking wheels, dust rising with every step, coating your skin and teeth in a fine layer of grit. You start to smell like everyone else. Sweat, smoke, and slow-moving decay. The trail is not scenic. It is endless. Rolling grass, distant trees, the occasional startled animal fleeing your caravan like it knows what's coming. The heat builds fast, the sun feels closer out here. It bakes your skin, cracks your lips, makes your clothes cling to your body like damp paper. You stop for lunch, if it can be called that. Hard tack, which is less food and more edible drywall, and maybe a bit of jerky you've chewed into leather. Water is precious. You ration it. You try not to think about how much dust is in your canteen. Children cry, oxmen collapse, wagons break. Sometimes someone's foot slips under a wheel and gets crushed, or a wagon overturns, trying to descend a steep incline, and you all stop to help or not. If the mood is bad, and it often is, you just keep walking quietly, pretending you didn't hear the screaming. By now, dysentery has introduced itself. No one invited it, but it came anyway. Like an overly familiar uncle at a wedding, it moves quickly, claiming one traveller after another. It begins with stomach cramps, then the sweating, then the water, the kind that doesn't stop. People squat behind bushes and don't come back. You learn not to drink from shallow streams, or if you do, you pretend not to notice the bloated animal carcass 50 yards upstream. Every day is a loop. Walk, stop, eat something that tastes like disappointment, sleep on the ground. Try to ignore the sounds of people groaning, coughing, muttering prayers. Some pray for strength, others pray for death. You do neither, you just keep moving. The monotony becomes its own kind of madness. You forget what day it is. You forget what month. You stop writing in your journal if you ever started one. You don't know how far you've come, only how far you haven't. The ruts in the trail grow deeper as you pass the graves of those who didn't make it. There are many, sometimes marked, sometimes not. One morning, a wagon train ahead of you abandons a child's coffin on the side of the road. No one says anything. You walk past it like it's a rock or a tree stump, something natural, something expected. Food starts to run low. Not gone, just less. You begin measuring meals not by fullness, but by whether or not you feel faint afterward. Flour is weighed, sugar is hoarded, meat becomes a rare treasure. You begin to dream about apples, not pies, just apples, raw and cold and clean. You would trade everything in your wagon for one bite of something that isn't dry or greasy or crawling with invisible sickness. Your clothes are falling apart. The seams give first, then the buttons. You try to patch what you can, but the needle breaks and you lose the thread. Your shoes wear thin, then they wear through. You tie rags around your feet, which help until it rains, then they become sponges, pulling the cold into your bones. You walk anyway. The nights are worse than the days. Cold creeps in. Coyotes howl. You think you hear voices outside your wagon, but it's just the wind. Or maybe it isn't. Sleep is shallow and full of dreams about home or food or being buried alive under a collapsing wagon. You start talking to yourself. Or maybe it's to the oxen. They don't answer. Not in words, anyway. But you start to feel like they understand. You envy their simplicity. Eat, walk, pull, die. Injury is inevitable. Blisters turn to infections. A woman slices her hand on a cooking knife and is dead within a week from blood poisoning, whatever that is. A man breaks his leg and has to be left behind. You don't argue. No one does. There's no such thing as rescue, just the trail, and whether or not you can stay upright on it. Still, you press forward. You've come too far to turn back. Everyone says so. No one wants to admit the truth that every step feels heavier, every mile more dangerous than the last. The land grows wilder, the sky darker, the trail narrower. Whispers begin about the mountains, how the pass can close early, how the snow can trap you if you don't make it through in time. No one wants to hear it, but everyone thinks about it. You try not to. You tell yourself it'll be fine, that the worst is behind you. You believe it because the alternative is unbearable. You walk until your feet bleed. You eat until the food runs out. You try not to look at the people beside you and wonder how long they'll last, or how long you will. This is life on the trail. Not glory, not adventure, just dust, dysentery, despair, and the growing realization that California may not be the promised land. It may just be a rumor you're slowly dying to chase. You first meet the donors somewhere along the Platte River. The grass is greener here, the sky a little less punishing, and for a brief moment it almost feels like you're making progress. The trail has worn most people down to their dullest version of themselves, gritty, hungry, blistered. But the donors still carry themselves like they've just stepped out of a painting called Hope Springs Eternal. That alone should have been a warning. George Donner is a solid man in his early 60s with the beard of a philosopher and the optimism of someone who hasn't been outside long enough to learn better. His younger brother Jacob is quieter, less boisterous, but equally infected with the idea that westward expansion is some kind of divine invitation. They've brought their families along, wives, children, hired hands, a handful of young men whose job descriptions are vague but involve a lot of lifting and not a lot of thinking. Their wagons are big, their oxen are tired, and their food supplies are generous for now. They even have a few luxuries you abandoned miles ago. Books, furniture, porcelain dishes. You want to be annoyed, but mostly you're just hungry. They greet your group like old friends, even if you've never met before. George shakes your hands with the kind of grip that suggests confidence bordering on delusion. They talk about Illinois, about the fertile land ahead, about the timing of the journey. You nod politely while trying not to stare at their clean shirts and well-fed horses. Everyone's still wearing smiles, but yours is starting to crack. It doesn't take long before talk turns to strategy, specifically routes. There's a growing anxiety among the immigrants. Everyone knows winter comes early in the Sierra Nevada, and everyone knows the mountains can close if the snows hit too soon. You've all heard the stories, wagons buried, travelers stranded, whole groups frozen in place. The word shortcut starts floating through campfire conversations like the smell of something both tempting and spoiled. That's when George Donner mentions the Hastings cutoff. It's not a trail, he admits. Not exactly, more like a proposed route. An alternate path suggested by one Lansford Hastings, an enterprising sort, who recently published a guidebook promising a faster way to California, one that veers south through the Wasatch Mountains and across the Salt Desert before rejoining the main trail. Hastings himself supposedly took the route, or at least wrote confidently as though he had, which is good enough for most of the donors. George is convinced it'll shave weeks off the journey. Jacob nods. The others nod. You're not sure if they believe it or just want to believe something. The donors aren't alone in their faith. Another prominent man in the group, James Reed, is also on board, a former businessman with a square jaw and a lot of opinions. Reed is the kind of man who says things like calculated risk while someone else digs a grave. He swears he's read the Hastings Guide, swears it's feasible, swears it'll put you ahead of the other wagon trains. That's the hook, beating the rush. Getting to California before the good land is gone. Before winter closes the door. Before the dreams spoil. A few in your group raise concerns. An old trapper who's ridden the mountains says the route is untested, dangerous, full of bad terrain and worse water. He's ignored. Optimism has momentum, so does desperation. You're behind schedule, low on food, and tired of waking up every morning with frost on your eyebrows. You don't want a shortcut. You need one, so you follow. The decision doesn't come with fanfare. There's no grand announcement, no dramatic parting of the ways. Just one morning, your wagons veer south when others keep west. A quiet fork in the road, a tilt of the compass, and your fate changes permanently. You tell yourself it's just another trail. You tell yourself you'll rejoin the main group in a few weeks. You tell yourself you'll be eating oranges by November. Lies come easy when the alternative is unbearable. At first, the route seems manageable. Narrower, yes. Rockier, yes. But passable. The land is wild but not unfriendly. And the donors move forward with the kind of cheer that suggests no one's quite aware of what's coming. They joke around the fire. They share supplies. They talk about building houses in the California sun, planting vineyards, naming their children after rivers they've never seen. It would be charming if it weren't so catastrophically premature. Then come the mountains. The Wasatch Range rises like a wall, indifferent and steep, and the trail, such as it is, vanishes into dense forest and broken rock. There's no clear path. You spend days clearing trees, digging out slopes, building makeshift roads, one boulder at a time. Progress slows to a crawl. Some days you cover 2 miles, others less. Oxen collapse, wagons get stuck. Tempers fray. James Reed grows increasingly defensive. George Donner grows increasingly quiet. The shortcut is starting to look like sabotage. You keep going, because turning back now would be admitting you made a mistake. And no one wants to admit that. Not Reed, not the donors, not you. You tell yourself the worst is behind you, even as the terrain gets worse. You tell yourself the desert ahead will be flat and fast. You tell yourself the map is accurate, even though you know it was drawn by a man who once described a canyon as a minor inconvenience. Each night you collapse into sleep more from exhaustion than rest. The children are coughing more. The food is spoiling faster. The road is chewing through your wagon like termites through a church pew. And yet the donors still talk about California like it's a guarantee, as if enough grit and determination can bend geography to your will. It can't. But no one says that out loud. Instead, you keep walking behind them, following the shortcut, watching as the land rises higher, the air thins, and the sunlight takes on that pale, brittle quality that only shows up when winter is somewhere nearby waiting. And still, the dawners smile. It doesn't take long for the shortcut to start feeling like a trap. Maybe 3 days in, maybe 4, you lose track because time starts to blur once the terrain becomes vertical. The trees are thick, the undergrowth tangled, and the trail you were promised quickly reveals itself to be more of a concept than a reality. There's no road here, no markings, just a series of increasingly bad decisions strung together by desperation and blind faith in a man you've never met. You hear his name, often Lansford Hastings, the author, the dreamer, the man who drew a dotted line on a map and called it a faster way. Some in the group still talk about him like he's a prophet, a genius ahead of his time. Others mutter less polite things. You lean toward the latter camp, especially after your wagon gets stuck between 2 boulders that absolutely weren't supposed to be here. And it takes 5 men, 4 hours, and a snapped axle to get it out. The Wasatch Mountains don't care that you're late. They rise in front of you like a sneer. All jagged rock and thick pine. Every foot gained feels like a negotiation with gravity, and gravity is in no mood to bargain. You chop trees, you move stones, you fill ruts with brush and hope. What should be a week's journey takes nearly a month. You lose time, you lose strength, you start losing oxen, one by one, as they collapse under the strain. Legs buckling, ribs visible through hide. There's no pasture here, no rest, just more uphill. The nights are colder now, you huddle under blankets that don't seem to insulate anymore. The fires smoke too much and burn too little. Conversations grow shorter. The children stop asking questions. They've learned there are no good answers. One of them asks if this is still America. You tell them yes, but you don't sound sure. After weeks of crawling through rock and pine, you break free of the mountains, only to discover the next obstacle, the great salt desert. It stretches out before you like a punishment someone once dared God to invent. Flat, white, and endless. There's no water, no shade, no landmarks, just crusted salt underfoot and a sun overhead that seems intent on baking you where you stand. The wagon wheels begin to sink. The oxen hesitate. Even the bravest among you go quiet. Crossing the desert is supposed to take 2 days. It takes 5. You set out at night to avoid the heat. The temperature drops, but the salt reflects moonlight like glass, making it hard to see. Harder still to breathe. Each step feels like a choice between movement and survival. The air grows thinner, and your skin dries out so completely it starts to crack. Lips split, eyelids burn, children cry without tears. The oxen go first. One by one they collapse. You try to get them up. You beg. You curse. You beat them. None of it works. They lie there and die slowly, quietly, like they've decided the journey isn't worth it. Some people leave wagons behind overloaded with furniture and memories and push forward on foot. You pass abandoned supplies, barrels, trunks, crates, wedding dresses, looms, books, everything once precious, now just dead weight on an impossible path. Your own wagon makes it 2 days before the wheels buckle. The wood has warped from the heat, the iron rims loosened. You unload what you can, the rest stays behind. You walk, dragging what little you have left. Your boots have given up. You wrap your feet in strips of old clothing. Each step feels like walking across hot gravel with your bones exposed. There's a moment somewhere in the middle of the salt flats when you realize you might not make it. Not eventually, not at all. That's when you start having the thoughts. Quiet ones. The kind that don't belong in civilized company. What if we turned back? What if we stayed right here? What if we weren't meant to survive this? Someone in the group starts hallucinating. They say they see water ahead. A lake just beyond the horizon. Everyone rushes forward only to find more salt, more heat, more nothing. The mirage shatters something in you. You stop looking for hope. You start counting the hours since your last sip of water. The math is bad. Finally, you reach the far side of the desert, or rather, what's left of you does. 20 wagons entered, maybe half emerge. Fewer with working wheels, the oxen that survived are ghosts of themselves. Shaking, skittish, ribs showing through dust-coated hides, people collapse in the dirt. No one has the energy to speak. You boil whatever water you can find and drink it too fast. Some vomit. Others just lie in silence, staring at the sky like it owes them something. The donors press forward, but the confidence is gone. George looks older. Jacob no longer smiles. Reed tries to maintain authority, but no one listens to him now. He's just another man with sunburn and a bad reputation. Hastings, of course, is nowhere to be found. He left a note, literally a note, nailed to a tree, saying he went ahead and that the road was difficult but passable. You debate going back just to punch that tree out of spite. The journey continues, but it's not the same anymore. Something has shifted. People stop dreaming aloud. No one talks about building houses or planting orchards. You've all seen what the land is capable of. You've seen the shortcut. You've survived it barely. But something inside you didn't. From here on, it's not about thriving. It's about enduring. You don't know it yet, but winter waits ahead. Quiet, patient, inevitable. And you've just wasted a month chasing a mirage through mountains and salt, led by a ghost in a guidebook. You've lost time. You've lost wagons, you've lost animals, you've lost faith, and you're not even in the Sierras yet. It turns out that when a shortcut starts with a mountain range, you should probably reconsider calling it a shortcut. The Wasatch Mountains rise like a cruel joke. Sharp ridges, narrow ravines, and dense forests that haven't seen an axe in years. You thought the salt flats were bad, but at least they were flat. This is vertical chaos. The trail, if it ever existed, disappears entirely. In its place is a forest so thick you could lose an ox 10 feet in. And you almost do. Progress becomes hypothetical. Each morning you wake up stiff and shivering, then spend the rest of the day soaring through trees and dragging branches out of the way like a very tired beaver. You're not traveling anymore. You're clearing road 1 foot at a time. There's no map, no guide, no kindly old trapper with words of wisdom. Just trees. So many trees, and all of them in the way. You've never hated wood before. Now you dream about it falling on your head just so you can stop swinging this dull axe. The sound of chopping becomes a background hum, endless thewing, splintering, grunting. Even the kids stop playing. There's no room for play anymore. Not in this place. Not when every fallen log means another delay, another hour of backbreaking labor, just to move a few hundred yards. You measure progress in broken tools and smashed fingers. Food is dwindling fast. It doesn't disappear so much as quietly stop being enough. You portion out flour like it's gold dust. You scrape the inside of barrels, hoping for forgotten crumbs. Meat, when you have it, is dry and stringy, soaked in salt and regret. The oxen are gaunt. Their steps are slow. You start wondering if they know something you don't. Some people try hunting, but it's a waste of powder. The forest is too quiet. No deer, no birds, just squirrels with judging eyes and the occasional coyote, which is more competition than threat. Someone traps a rabbit and 3 families argue over how to divide it. You get a bite, maybe 2. It tastes like nothing. Morale is a memory. Even the donors aren't smiling anymore. George sits by the fire most nights with a blank stare and a cracked mug of something that used to be coffee. Jacob keeps busy, sharpening tools and muttering about wasted time. Reed paces like he's hoping the ground will open and provide an alternate route. You all know the truth. You're late, not behind schedule. Late. Winter is coming, and the Sierras are still ahead, and you're still stuck here, chopping through a forest that refuses to end. You begin to see signs of it in the air. The mornings carry a bite now. The wind stings a little more. Frost glitters on your blankets when you wake. The sun sets sooner. The birds have stopped chirping. You start to pay attention to the clouds, not the fluffy ones, the heavy grey ones that crawl across the sky like warnings. People get snappish, bites break out, minor disagreements about where to camp or how to ration food spiral into shouting matches. One man accuses another of hoarding flour. A woman is caught sneaking extra beans to her child. Someone punches someone else over a blanket. It's not about the blanket, it never is. It's about how far you've fallen. The group fractures, little cliques form. Trust thins. People start sleeping with knives closer at hand. Not because of danger exactly, but because no one feels safe anymore. Not from the land, not from each other. There's a growing awareness that civility is only as strong as your caloric intake. And your rations are measured in spoonfuls now. Even your animals seem broken. The oxen stumble. The mules wee one horse, too old or too smart to keep going, simply lays down and doesn't get up. You leave it behind. The children ask questions you can't answer. Why is the mountain taking so long? When will we see the grass again? Do you think there will be snow? You lie, not because you want to, but because you have to. The truth is heavy, and you're all already carrying too much. The Wasatch doesn't give up easily. Every bend reveals another obstacle, another fallen tree, another slope, too steep for wheels. You build ramps out of brush. You lower wagons by rope. You curse. You pray. You stop both when they stop working. There's a point where the trail narrows to the edge of a ravine. One misstep, and your wagon tips into oblivion. You stare into the canyon and wonder what it would be like to just let go. A man does eventually. No one sees it happen, but they find his hat at the edge and no sign of him below. They say it was an accident. No one believes that, but you all agree to say it anyway. It's easier that way. After weeks, honestly, it feels like months. You break free of the trees, the wasach spits you out like a chewed stick. And for a moment you think it's over, that you've won, that you've beaten the mountain, but then you look at what's ahead. The land rolls on, harsh, empty, still climbing, and far in the distance, like jagged teeth in the sky, you see them. The Sierra Nevada. Snow already dusts the peaks. They look closer than they are, and they look angry. You've lost weeks in the forest, weeks you didn't have, food you needed, people you liked, parts of yourself that once believed in good outcomes. The shortcut has cost more than time. It's cost belief, and you're not even at the worst part yet. You move forward because there's nothing else to do. Back is impossible. Here is unlivable. Ahead is unknown. But at least it might be different. So you walk on sore feet through brittle grass toward the mountains. The Wasatch is behind you now. You survived it, but you're not the same, and neither is anyone else. You thought the Wasatch Mountains were the worst part. You really did. But that was before the desert. It doesn't look so bad at first. The great salt desert stretches out like a pale promise. Flat and open with no trees to clear, no cliffs to descend, no mud to sink in, just white earth and a straight path to freedom, or so you think. After weeks of climbing and chopping and dragging wagons through forests, the idea of smooth ground feels like salvation. But then you take your first step, and your foot sinks an inch into something that crunches like gravel, but feels like ash. You look down. It's salt. Endless, blinding salt. Not the table kind, not the kind you sprinkle on beans. This salt is crusted across the ground in thick, chalky layers that break apart under your weight and cling to everything. Your boots, your wheels, your skin. And once you're in it, there's no turning back. The salt flats go on for miles. The next water source is on the other side. You either cross it or you don't. The sun becomes your main concern within the first hour. There's no shade, nothing to hide behind, not even a shrub. The light reflects off the salt in every direction, bouncing into your eyes, your pores, your soul. The air is dry and motionless. Wind might offer relief, but the desert doesn't bother. It prefers stillness, a kind of choking silence that feels like being held underwater in full daylight. Your lips crack open, your skin dries out like jerky. Even your eyelids feel burned. Everyone slows down. Even the oxen, those stubborn survivors of mud and mountains, begin to hesitate. Their hooves slip on the brittle crust. Their legs wobble. They stop more often, snorting and trembling, eyes rolling like they can sense what's coming. You give them water, less than they need, but more than you can spare, and push on. The wheels start sinking next. What looks flat is actually a crust over mud. And as the sun beats down, the weight of your wagons breaks through. Each turn of the wheel becomes a battle. You push, you pull, you strip off your coat, even though it means sunburn, because every extra ounce of sweat feels like a threat now. Salt cakes your clothes. It creeps into the seams, into your mouth, into your thoughts. You stop speaking, everyone does. Talking wastes moisture, and no one has anything comforting to say. Your tongue is thick, your throat is raw. Every time you swallow, it feels like you're eating sandpaper. By the second day, the animals begin to die. It starts with one mule. It drops suddenly, mid-step, legs folding like paper. You try to get it up. You pour your last cup of water over its nose, hoping for movement. There is none. Others follow. Oxmen lie down and don't rise. You can't carry them. You can't wait for them. You strip the harnesses off their bodies and leave them behind. You don't bury them. There's no time, and the ground is too hard anyway. Some people try to ride what animals are left. Others abandon their wagons entirely and take only what they can carry. Barrels, flour sacks, family Bibles left behind in heaps. You walk past them like debris from a shipwreck. You stop caring what you lose. You stop noticing the sun. All that matters now is water. You haven't had any in 2 days. You've chewed on cloth, sucked stones, tried to imagine moisture. It doesn't help. Eventually, someone eats leather. It's not a conversation, just a quiet choice. Someone pulls a strip of rawhide from a wagon, cuts it with a knife and starts chewing. You watch, then you do the same. It tastes like bitter smoke and old dust. It's something to move in your mouth, something to keep your brain from screaming. After that comes the belt. You boil it first. What little water you have used, not to drink, but to soften an accessory you swore, was genuine cowhide. You sip the broth. You chew the strap. You tell yourself it's better than nothing. One woman collapses. Her husband drags her a few yards, then stops. They sit together in the salt, saying nothing. He tries to lift her. She doesn't move. Eventually he leaves her there under a scrap of canvas. You do not look back. By the third day, your vision starts to blur. The horizon wobbles. Mirages appear. Lakes, rivers, glimmering pools of what your brain wants to believe is salvation. You chase one, then another. Each time you end up kneeling in salt, clawing at the ground like you can dig a well into a mirage. The nights offer no relief. The temperature drops fast and the salt traps the cold like a grudge. Your body, parched and sunburned, begins to shiver. You try to sleep, but the ground is too hard. Your skin sticks to the fabric of your clothes. You dream about rain and wake up with your tongue glued to the roof of your mouth. When you finally stumble out of the desert, you barely realize it. The salt fades. The ground firms up. A trickle of water appears. Muddy, bitter, warm. You drink it anyway. You don't care. It might be poison. It might be salvation. You lap it up like a dog. People collapse. Some weep. Some don't have the energy to. You're not sure how many made it across. You don't remember who started with you. The donors are here mostly. The reeds are too. A few wagons, a few oxen. Everyone else is either behind, lost, or silent. You don't talk about what happened in the desert. You don't have the words. All you know is that something inside you stayed back there. Something soft, something hopeful. What's left is a shell held together by sunburn and necessity. The shortcut is behind you now. The worst you hope is over, but winter is waiting, and the mountains are still ahead. You make it through the desert barely. You make it through the mountains, sort of. And now at long last you reach the place everyone's been talking about since Missouri, the Sierra Nevada. The final obstacle, the last great barrier between you and California, the land of oranges, freedom, and the kind of bathwater dreams are made of. Only there's a problem. It's October and the mountains are already dusted with snow. At first it doesn't seem like a crisis. A little snow hurt anyone, you tell yourself. The sky is just teasing, just a flurry or two. And you've come this far. Surely the trail ahead is passable. Surely the worst is behind you. But the mountains don't care about your milestones. They don't care how far you've come or how many oxmen you've buried. They are steep, unbending, and utterly indifferent to your arrival. You stop near Truckee Lake, later renamed Donner Lake, for reasons you'll soon understand, and make camp just for the night, just to rest. The snow can't last, you reason. It's early. You'll wait a day, maybe two, and then press on. California is just beyond those ridges, 40 miles, maybe less. You could crawl that far if you had to. But the snow doesn't stop. It thickens. First a few inches, then a few feet. The sky turns heavy and grey and begins to dump white silence over the world. Trees vanish under powder. The trail disappears completely. Every direction looks the same. White, quiet, endless. You try to move forward, but the wagons bog down. The animals slip. Your boots fill with snow and your legs seize up from the cold. The passes ahead are blocked, avalanche-prone. Impossible. So you go back to the lake. And just like that, you're stuck. At first, no one wants to admit it. There's talk of waiting a few days, letting the storm pass, trying again. But as the days stretch into weeks, reality sets in. This isn't a delay, this is a trap. The cabins you build are crude and miserable. Logs, stacked over dirt floors, hastily thrown together with whatever tools you haven't already broken or lost. Gaps in the walls, leaking roofs, wind slides in under the doors and through the cracks, cold and smug. Fires are hard to keep lit. Smoke chokes the air. Everything smells like damp wood and desperation. Food becomes the new obsession. Rations are already low, much of it eaten, spoiled or abandoned. Back in the desert, what's left is divided carefully, painfully. There's no more meals, not really, just portions, scraps. You chew slowly, hoping to fool your stomach. You drink warm water to feel full. It doesn't work. You eat what you have, then you eat what you can find. The pine bark goes first, scraped from trees, boiled until it turns soft, or at least not sharp. It tastes like bitterness and defeat. Next come the animal hides, old leather harnesses, shoes, even belt straps. You boil them too, pick at the gluey mess that forms, and tell yourself it's food. The livestock are mostly gone. A few oxen survived the desert, and now one by one they're killed and cooked. Nothing is wasted. Bones are boiled. Hooves are softened and chewed. You even use the water from the boiling to make a kind of broth, if you can call it that. It smells like wet ash and regret. You drink it anyway. Snow keeps falling. The drifts rise past the windows. You shovel paths between the cabins, but they collapse overnight. The woods are too quiet now. No birds, no animals, nothing stirs except the wind. One night you hear wolves in the distance. The next morning a trail of bloody paw prints circles the camp. Sickness spreads. Cold-related, hunger-related, stress-related, doesn't matter. Fevers flare, children cough, adults groan in the night, their bodies hollowed out by starvation. You wrap yourselves in furs, in blankets, in whatever rags you have left, and still it's not enough. The cold gets in anyway. It waits, it watches, it climbs into your joints and nests there. You start dreaming about food. Vivid, taunting dreams, tables covered in bread, in fruit, in roast meats, dripping with juice. You wake up salivating, heartbroken. One man dreams so vividly he bites into a frozen piece of wood in his sleep, breaks 2 teeth and cries for an hour. Another swears he smelled cinnamon. He didn't. There is no cinnamon. Hope becomes a kind of performance, and some people still talk about rescue, about the passes clearing, about spring. You nod along because arguing doesn't help, but deep down you know better. You know what's coming. The next step, the line you haven't crossed yet, but will. Not everyone makes it that far. A woman dies quietly in the night, an older man follows. The next day, there's a frozen child wrapped in a coat. Face peaceful, mouth still sticky with pine bark. You don't hold funerals. There's no strength for mourning. You dig shallow snow graves when you can. Other times, you just cover the body with branches and try not to look directly at it. The donors are nearby in a separate camp across the lake. You hear whispers that they're worse off than you. Fewer supplies, more snow. George is injured, some kind of cut that won't heal. His wife nurses him as best she can. You don't visit, you can't. You've got enough misery of your own to manage. By now, everything you believed about civilization has been peeled away. Manners, decency, even time. There are no clocks here, no schedules, just snow and hunger, and the terrible growing realization that there may not be enough bodies left to bury the dead. You sit in silence most days, staring at the fire, counting the bites of pine mush you have left, watching the snow pile higher outside. You wonder if rescue is still possible, if anyone even knows you're here, if they'd care. You don't talk about California anymore. You don't talk about orchards or rivers or fertile soil. That version of your life feels like a story someone else told you. A dream you overheard through the wall of a better house. Now there is only this snow, silence, hunger, and the sense that the worst decisions have not yet been made. Time becomes strange. It doesn't move forward so much as stretch out sideways, looping back on itself in long, sleepless nights and colorless days. You can't remember what month it is. You're not even sure what day. The snow outside never melts, and the fire inside never really warms. There are no clocks here, no routines left. No purpose other than surviving until the next hour and then the one after that. It is always cold. It is always quiet, except when it's not. The hunger is constant, not a pang, not a rumble, something deeper. You forget what full feels like. You forget what flavor is. Everything you eat now tastes like ash, or wet bark, or boiled leather. Your body has adjusted to starvation in the same way a sinking ship eventually adjusts to water. You stop feeling the sharp edge of it and instead feel hollow. Not numb exactly, just empty. There are days when your hands shake so badly you can't hold a spoon. You pretend it's the cold, but you know better. Your muscles are wasting, your bones ache, your skin has turned shallow and thin like a curtain stretched too tight. You don't recognize yourself in the reflection of the water bucket. You're not sure anyone would. People begin to change. At first, it's small. Quiet irritations, sharp tones, muttered complaints. But hunger distorts everything. Perception, memory, personality. The people around you become suspicious, bitter, unpredictable. There are fights now. Real ones, over food, over firewood, over nothing. One man accuses another of stealing a strip of dried oxhide. He probably did, but no one's going to punish him. What would be the point? Arguments erupt between families, even within them. A wife slaps her husband for eating more than his share. A teenage boy shouts at his mother, claiming she's favoring his younger sister. You try to stay out of it, keep your head down, keep your hands busy, but even silence feels aggressive now. Even looking someone in the eyes can spark tension. You start choosing where you sit carefully. You count your bites when others are watching. You wrap your food in cloth so no one sees how much or how little you have left. The hallucinations begin not long after. You don't notice them at first. A flicker in the corner of your eye. A voice you think you hear outside the cabin wall. You convince yourself it's just the wind. Then one day you wake up and see your mother sitting at the edge of your bed. Even though she died years ago, she looks disappointed. She doesn't say anything. Then she's gone. You don't mention it to anyone. Others are seeing things too. A child starts talking to someone who isn't there. A man swears he saw a line of wagons coming up the pass. One woman insists she can smell bread baking. Another stares at the fire for an entire day and doesn't blink once. You learn not to ask questions. Everyone is losing their grip in their own private way. There's no point comparing breakdowns. Sometimes people wander out into the snow without their coats. They say they're just getting wood or going to check the lake, but they don't come back. You find one of them frozen upright against a tree, arms outstretched like he was trying to hug the wind. His face looks calm, and that's the worst part. He looks relieved. The worst fights are still coming. One evening there's a shouting match in the cabin next to yours, a long one. You don't know what it's about, but it ends with silence. And then someone sobbing. The next morning, the door stays shut. No one goes in, you don't ask. The donors are still out there across the lake, trying to survive in their own collapsing bubble of suffering. George is no better. Jacob is worse. Word trickles back that someone in their group has died. Then two, then more. The specifics are vague, the implication is not. You start to hear the word on people's lips. Low, quiet, like a confession no one wants to own. Cannibalism? No one admits to it, not yet. But the suggestion hangs in the air like smoke. You notice some people watching the bodies a little longer than they should. You catch a glance between two men after a death that lasts just a bit too long. A woman mentions that burial is a waste. Another says, the Lord would understand. These aren't jokes. It not anymore. You think about it. Everyone does. You wish you didn't. You try to focus on the fire or the snow or the ache in your legs, anything but the hunger. But your brain won't stop showing you images of meat, of cooking, of the shape of bones under thinning skin. You wonder what you would do, what you could do, what line you haven't crossed yet. Someone dies in your cabin, you help carry the body outside. You tell yourself it's just to make more space. You don't ask what happens to it later. You don't want to know. You don't want to be involved. You want to believe you're still yourself, still civilized, still human, but you're not sure anymore. There is no more pretending. You're not surviving in the wilderness. You're not brave pioneers. You're a group of starving people trapped in the snow with no food and no future. And it's starting to feel like the only rule left is whether or not you're still breathing tomorrow. Hatred grows like mold in the corners of the cabin. Old feuds resurface. New ones spark like flint. You stop caring who started what. Everyone is angry. Everyone is scared. Everyone is alone. Even in a crowded room, the air smells like wet wood, boiled leather, and something else. Something faint and metallic. You don't want to identify it. You just hold your breath and try to sleep. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Outside, the snow continues to fall. Inside, the world keeps shrinking. And deep down, you begin to understand that the worst thing isn't dying. It's surviving long enough to consider the alternatives. There comes a point when the hunger shifts. It stops being sharp and angry. It dulls like a blade, too tired to cut. You stop fantasizing about meals and start thinking in shapes, limbs, torsos, ribs. You stop dreaming about bread and start measuring the people around you in portions. It's not something you want. It's not something you say. But the idea creeps in slowly, like smoke under a door. The food is gone. Not low. Gone. The flour barrel is empty. The beans are gone. The salted meat. The hard tack. The scraps of bark, the strips of hide, all gone. Even the boiled leather has run out. You chewed your belt to a soggy nub and swallowed it with hot water and hope. That was days ago. Your stomach no longer growls. It just aches. Your body is cannibalizing itself. You feel it in your legs, in the way your vision goes dark when you stand up too fast, in the way your skin bruises when someone brushes against you. The livestock is gone too. The last ox died days ago. Someone suggested saving it. Others had already started carving. There was no ceremony, no debate, just cold hands, working quickly, cutting meats into manageable slabs, passing them out like they were firewood. You ate it. You didn't ask where it came from. But now even that is gone. Bones have been picked clean, boiled, crushed for marrow, then boiled again. And yet the people remain. You try not to look at them the same way you looked at the animals. You try not to think in weights, in cuts, in calories. But you do. Everyone does. No one talks about it. But the silence around the subject is louder than any conversation. There's a space in every room now, an unspoken understanding, a calculation hanging in the air. If someone dies, what then? It begins with death. Always death first. That's the rule. That's the boundary everyone tells themselves matters. You won't kill. You'd never kill. But if someone dies, if they're already gone, is it really so different from the ox? Is it still a sin if it saves a life? If it's not murder, if it's just survival, someone in the camp makes the first move. You don't know who. Maybe the donors, maybe someone else. You hear about it in a whisper. Someone took meat from a body. Just a little. Cooked it. Ate it. The story spreads, but no one reacts, not openly. No one storms off in outrage. No one shouts. A few people close their eyes and say a prayer. A few others nod slowly like they've just been waiting for permission. Then it happens again. Another death. Another quiet redistribution. Someone is chosen to handle the body. They do it behind the cabin, out of sight, but you can still hear the chopping, the slicing, the low scrape of a blade on bone. You pretend it's something else. You stare into the fire and try to convince yourself it's just kindling being split, but it's not. You don't know what to do when your turn comes. You don't even know when the moment arrived. All you know is that one night someone hands you a bowl of something hot. It smells like meat. Not beef, not pork, but meat. Your hands shake as you take it. You don't ask questions. You don't want to know whose ribs you're warming your fingers around. You sip the broth. You chew slowly. You tell yourself it doesn't taste like anything familiar. You tell yourself, that's a good thing. You eat, maybe that's all you do. Maybe that's where it ends. Maybe you draw the line at scavenging the dead, at doing what you must to stay breathing another day. Or maybe you don't. Maybe the boundaries keep moving. Maybe one day someone dies and people wonder if it was really just exposure. If maybe they were helped along, a pillow held too long, a knife drawn too quickly. You don't want to believe that. But then again, what do you believe in anymore? Some people refuse to eat. They choose starvation. Choose to fade quietly rather than participate. You understand them. You admire them even. But you don't join them because you're not ready to die. Not yet, not when you've come this far. Not when the rescue parties might still be coming. Your body begins to recover in strange, unsettling ways. After a small meal, your mind sharpens. Your hands stop shaking. You can walk farther, stand longer. You feel warmth again, even if it's fleeting. And you hate yourself for it. Because now your survival is a product of something you once considered unthinkable. You are alive because someone else isn't. And not just in a metaphorical, tragic way. Literally, some people try to justify it. They say it's natural, that it's been done before in sieges, in shipwrecks. They cite the Bible, they cite history. Others don't speak at all. They just eat in silence, eyes lowered, faces hollow. You realize that you'll all remember this for the rest of your lives if you live that long. And if you don't, someone else might remember you in the same way, gratefully, guilty, with a full belly and a haunted expression. You hold the knife once, just hold it. It's heavy in your hand, the metal cold even near the fire. You stare at it for a long time. Then you put it down. You try to sleep that night, but your dreams are confused. Someone's face, someone who died, is there in the darkness. They don't speak. They just look at you. You wake up shaking. By now you've stopped pretending anything will return to normal. Even if you're rescued, even if you make it out, you will carry this with you. Not just what you did, what you thought about doing, what you didn't stop, what you accepted. That part won't leave you. And still, the snow keeps falling. By the time the rescue parties arrive, you're not expecting them anymore. Hope faded weeks ago, maybe longer. It didn't vanish all at once, it just thinned out. Like the broth you used to drink before it ran out. First you stopped counting the days, then you stopped asking questions, then you stopped listening. No one knew anything anyway. Rumors came and went like the wind, and none of them brought food. So when a man appears at the edge of camp one frozen morning, wrapped in furs and blinking against the light, it takes you a moment to realize he's real. For a second, you think he's another hallucination, one of the many your starved brain conjures up from time to time, but he speaks clearly, slowly. He says he's from California, says there's more coming, says he's here to help. You don't cry. You're too dry for that. You don't cheer either. That part of you is gone. You just stare at him and try to understand what he means by help. Food, warmth, a way out, all of it, or is he just another promise you can't afford to believe in? The first relief party isn't big, just a few men, pale and wind-bitten, carrying blankets, rations and bad news. There are no wagons, no extra animals, no magic sleigh. Ready to fly you down the mountain. There isn't enough of anything, not enough food, not enough room, not enough time. They bring flour, a little dried meat, some sugar, a few shirts, and they bring questions. Who's still alive? Who can walk? Who's ready to leave today? It's a test, though. They don't say it out loud. They can't take everyone. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The path is dangerous, the weather uncertain. There are too many mouths and not enough supplies, so they do what they have to do. They make choices. They look at you, your sunken cheeks, your trembling hands, your hollow stare. Can you walk? Can you keep up? If they take you, will you survive the trip? Or slow them down? and die along the way. You see it in their eyes. They're not just here to save people. They're here to triage. The strongest leave first, or at least the least weak. A handful of children, a couple of teenagers, a few adults who haven't completely collapsed. The rest of you stay behind again. You watch them go trudging through the snow with rescue at their backs. You want to feel happy for them. You want to believe they'll make it. But part of you also feels abandoned, like their survival shrinks your own chances, like they're taking the last pieces of hope with them. The men promise to return soon, with more supplies, with more help. They say it over and over, like repetition makes it true. Then they vanish into the trees and you're alone again. Except now the silence feels even heavier than before. The food they left doesn't last. It couldn't. Too many people, too many days, and the weather doesn't improve. More snow falls. The wind howls louder. Someone gets frostbite. Someone else collapses on the way to the latrine and isn't found until morning, frozen in place like a cautionary statue. Another rescue party comes, then another, weeks apart. Each time, fewer people leave. Each time, fewer are left. The trail is littered with those who didn't make it out. Bodies buried in shallow snow or
hidden behind trees. Some disappear without explanation. Some are too weak to stand by the time their name is called. The donors are still across the lake, slowly fading. George is nearly gone. Jacob is already dead. Their camp is quieter than yours now, which is saying something. You wonder who among them has eaten and who has been eaten. You wonder what the rescuers will find when they finally get there. You keep waiting. Each day someone else is missing from the fire circle. Sometimes you know where they went, sometimes you don't. The difference stops mattering. What matters is that the group is shrinking. You keep track of time by the number of people who are no longer here. When your chance comes, it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like exhaustion. You're not even sure you can make it, but you say yes. You say it quickly before anyone can change their mind. They give you a scrap of jerky, a tattered blanket, and a name. Someone who will lead you down the trail. You leave behind most of what you own. It's too heavy. So are the memories. You don't say goodbye to everyone. Some are asleep. Some are too far gone to understand. Some just look away. The walk down is slow. Every step feels like it costs something. You fall behind more than once. You think about collapsing, just sitting in the snow and letting it all end. But something keeps you moving. Maybe it's hunger. Maybe it's spite. Maybe it's the dull echo of what used to be willpower. You see bodies along the way, not buried, not hidden, just there. You don't look too closely. You don't ask names. Eventually the snow thins, the air warms, trees start to look less like tombstones. You find yourself blinking in sunlight, squinting at green shoots poking through the frost. There are sounds, birds, running water, civilization. You've made it. You're rescued, or at least you've escaped the snow. What comes next isn't comfort, it's confusion. Doctors, reporters, strangers asking questions you can't answer. Questions you don't want to answer. You see someone you thought was dead. You don't know whether to hug them or avoid them. You smell cooked food and feel nauseous. You sit in a warm room and can't stop shivering. People call you lucky. You nod. But the truth is, you are just less unlucky than others. You think about those who stayed behind, about the ones who died, and the ones who didn't. You wonder what part of you is still back there in the snow, in the silence, in the hunger. You live. And for a while that seems like enough. The snow is behind you. So is the silence, the smoke, the starving faces, and the ever-present question of who will be next. You're in California now, a real place, not just a fantasy whispered between wagon wheels and winter storms. You made it, you crossed the desert, you survived the mountains, you endured the unspeakable. But you are not who you were when you left. The first thing you notice is how loud the world feels. In towns, people laugh too freely, they eat too quickly, they speak in full sentences about things that don't involve weather or death or rations.
You sit at the edge of it all, nodding when appropriate, smiling when required, and saying as little as possible. You don't have the words for what you've been through, and even if you did, no one really wants to hear them. People ask questions anyway. They always do. Was it really as bad as they say? Did you know the donors? What did you eat? The last one comes in a whisper, always with a nervous glance. They ask because they're curious, because they can't help it, because some part of them finds it thrilling. You see it in their eyes, the mix of horror and hunger for a story that isn't theirs. You don't answer, or you answer vaguely. You say it was hard, that it was cold, that you're lucky, and you leave it at that. The real answers would make them uncomfortable, or worse. They'd turn your suffering into gossip. You start to hear rumors, printed stories, sensationalized accounts of cannibalism, madness, betrayal. Some are half-true, some are fiction. Some names that shouldn't be named. You try not to read them, but they find you anyway. Newspapers pinned up in taverns, whispers in trading posts, men laughing too loud at stories they don't understand. You learn that the public loves survivors until they realize what survival required. California is not what you imagined. You pictured green hills, fruit trees, warm winds. Instead, you arrive to mud streets, hastily built cabins, inflated prices, and strangers with eyes too sharp. Land is hard to get, work is harder, and no one really wants to hear about the journey that brought you here. You take what you can, labor, laundry, whatever earns you enough to eat and sleep. You tell yourself it's temporary, that you'll find your place eventually, but part of you knows that this is it, not a new beginning, just a different kind of endurance. At night, you still smell smoke even when there is none. It clings to your memories, to your clothing, to the inside of your mouth. You hear the wind in your dreams, howling through gaps in cabin walls that no longer exist. You wake up, reaching for a blanket that's already there. You check your fingers to make sure they haven't gone numb. You listen for footsteps that aren't coming. Sometimes you still feel hungry, even after a meal. Not regular hunger, but that deep echoing kind. The kind that once made you look at your neighbor and see calories. You try to push it away, but it lingers, crouching in the back of your mind, like an old habit you can't quite unlearn. You avoid certain foods now, anything too tender, anything you didn't cook yourself. You can't explain why, you just do. You meet other survivors here and there. Not often. A few of them settle nearby. Some try to start over, find work, start families. Others drift. You recognize them instantly. Not by their faces, but by the way they move, like they're still conserving energy. By the way they look. Around a room, always assessing, you make eye contact briefly, then look away. It's not shame, it's understanding. You've seen each other at your worst. There's nothing more to say. Some don't make it long after rescue. The body survives, but the mind doesn't. One man drinks himself into silence. A woman walks into the woods and never returns. A boy refuses to speak again. You hear their names sometimes, spoken like a warning or a eulogy. You don't tell your story, not the real one. You let others write it for you. Let them guess, exaggerate, sanitize. It's easier that way. You let people call you brave, heroic, strong. You let them pretend they would have done the same. You let them imagine survival was a choice, but you know better. You survived because you were lucky. Because you didn't die before someone arrived, because someone else did. That's the truth. And it lives in you now like a shadow stitched into your bones. You build a life or something like it. You gather routines, you learn to laugh again, though it never sounds quite the same. You find moments of peace, though they don't last long. You keep moving forward because backward is impossible, and standing still feels too much like freezing. You get older. Years pass. The world moves on. People forget details, new tragedies take their place. But every winter when the snow begins to fall, you feel it again. The memory of a place where the world stopped and survival meant something else entirely. And even when your hands are warm and your belly is full and you're sitting in a room with people who love you,
You never stopped smelling smoke. You joined the Donner Party because you wanted more. A new beginning. A piece of land to call your own. A future where the sun always shines and the soil gives back. You weren't greedy, just hopeful. You believed in the promise of the West because everyone around you did. Because the newspapers printed it in bold. Because men with maps said it was destiny. Because you wanted something better than a lifetime of scraping by on the same tired patch of earth. You weren't the first. You wouldn't be the last. America was full of people chasing better lives. And you were just one more wagon in a long line of dreamers heading toward the edge of the continent. The shortcut seemed like a good idea at the time. Everyone agreed it would save weeks, avoid the worst terrain, get you to California before the snow came. You didn't question it because you wanted to believe it, because if it were true, it meant you wouldn't have to struggle through another winter on the trail. It meant oranges by Christmas, a real roof, a real bed. No one tells you that shortcuts are just longer roads pretending to be clever. You found that out the hard way. In the mountains, in the desert, in the silence between meals, you learned that time is only saved when someone else has already paid the price, and no one had paved the Hastings cutoff before you. You were the price. The world didn't end all at once. It chipped away. A day here, a delay there, a broken wheel, a wrong turn, a stretch of trail that never should have been attempted with wagons. You lost time like loose coins out of a hole in your pocket. By the time you noticed it was gone, you were too far in to turn back. Then the snow came. You learned in real time how quickly civilization melts. When the firewood runs out, when the food disappears, when the map becomes useless, when people stop being neighbors and start being statistics, you learned what it feels like to eat slowly. Not because you're savoring the taste, but because you're hoping the next bite won't be the last. You learned how people look when they're starving. Not just thin, but hollowed out. Ghosts who still breathe. You told yourself you wouldn't do what others did. You'd never become that. You'd hold on to some part of your dignity, your decency, your former self. But the snow didn't care about your promises, and when the time came, you didn't have a choice. Or maybe you did, but it didn't feel like one. You remember the sound of the knife, the crackle of skin on the fire, the way people averted their eyes while they chewed. You remember what it took to survive, and you remember that survival is not the same thing as salvation. When you finally reached California, you expected to feel relief, maybe even joy. But what you felt was nothing, just a dull, grey quiet inside you. Where the panic used to be, you didn't celebrate, you didn't break down, you just stood there, surrounded by green hills and people who didn't know, and you tried to figure out what to do with yourself now that you weren't actively dying. You told yourself you'd rebuild, that you'd plant a garden, find peace. But everything felt temporary after the mountains. Every structure, every meal, every laugh felt fragile, like it could vanish with one wrong turn. People asked what it was like. You said hard or cold or we made it. What you meant was that you lost more than you brought with you. That the person who started this journey wasn't the one who finished it. That part of you is still out there, buried in the snow or scattered across the desert or quietly rotting behind a pine cabin near Truckee Lake. They called it a tragedy, a cautionary tale, a failure of leadership, a brutal chapter in a young nation's history. They gave it names and labels, and eventually they gave it distance. They turned it into something to study. You never did. To you, it wasn't history. It was your life. And no matter how far the years stretch between you and that winter, it never leaves you, not fully. You smell smoke when there isn't any. You flinch at the sound of wind through trees. You chew more slowly than others at the table. You count supplies even when you're full. You don't tell the whole story. No one does.
because there's no version of it that makes sense to someone who hasn't lived it. You carry it like a scar across the inside of your ribs, unseen, but always there. You joined the Donner Party for a better life. You got a crash course in how thin the line between civilization and collapse really is. You got California, sure, but not the one you dreamed of. And now every time you hear the word shortcut, you feel a chill crawl up your spine, like snow seeping into your boots again. Some lessons don't fade. Some stories don't end when you make it out alive. They just settle in, quiet and patient, waiting for winter.